Today we are talking about why amazing leaders lean in before they take action. It's a phase that I feel is so important and powerful for those of us who are trying to make some kind of move, whether it be in our professional careers or our personal lives, whatever it is. But this leaning in phase is really, really important. All right. Hey, Mike Jensen, how are you? Thanks for joining today, and welcome again to everybody. So I think a lot of you may know that I am a bowler and very proud to be. And so you may have seen this sitting on my desk behind me, but it is a prop for today. So when we bowl, these pins weigh between 3 pounds 6 ounces and 3 pounds 10 ounces. And so there are 10 of them in a rack. So you're knocking over a lot of wood here. But do you know how many degrees is actually needed for this bowling pin to lean or tilt before it actually falls over? Well, research studies show that it's actually 9.5 degrees. So this pin has to tilt 9.5 degrees before enough momentum is created before it actually falls over. Okay. This bowling pin is an example of how we get to lean in when we are ready to take some we're preparing to take some action. All right. So I define leaning in as that phase where we get really, really curious about an issue or a topic or a concept, and we simply want to learn more. So we've heard something, and now it's our opportunity to lean in. It's when we lean in that allows us to get really intrigued by the conversation and ask some really, really deep questions about that particular issue or concept before. And this is the key. It is always before we're getting ready to take action. It's that phase where we simply listen more. You may have heard the phrase about poking the bear. You're going to poke the bear here, and you're going to poke the bear really, really hard. You're going to take the fingers and jab it into its side, and you're going to just make it really uncomfortable, because you're going to learn as much as possible as you can before you're ready to take some action. So, in prepping for today, I want to make it perfectly clear that you cannot lean in without listening. So it's one of the amazing leadership qualities that I have in my free offer on my website. But number 4 is to listen, lean in, and take action. So last week we talked about listening and getting really, really open about, being able to hear things that are coming to us. And now we're going to talk about getting really, really curious in that whole lean in phase. Okay. So you're still listening here. You're putting on a diagnostic and an intuitive ear to listen and ask some really, really good questions so you can get some more information, because without listening and without leaning in, you can't take action. You can't take action in the way that you want to show up to best lead your team, your organization, and yourself. All right? So I've got 3 examples for us to bat around today. And again, welcome to everybody that's joining. It's great to see you. So the first example is around how we manage our professional reputation. First of all, we're responsible for it. We're responsible for the professional reputation we have and for knowing exactly what it is. Now, people will say, oh, you're great to work with, or so-and-so, they're a little difficult, or whatever it is. We are completely responsible for managing our reputation. And so for that, we've got to ask some really, really good and strong questions so we can manage that effectively. So for some, you may have already gone through your performance appraisal process, or you are about ready to go through your performance appraisal process. That moment where you sit down with your boss and you have that conversation about your rating. And I know in the last couple organizations I've worked in, we rated on a 5-point scale, and we had to do a lot of norming and storming around a 3 as satisfactory, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're doing great work. But, we think 3 out of 5 and we think, wah, wah, that's not really too good, right? But it is. I mean, it's all about where that norm's in within the organization. So how do you go about managing your professional reputation at work? Here's some things I found to be really, really helpful. So the first thing is that you start with your supervisor, your manager, your director, whomever that is, and you have that conversation so you know where you stand with them. You're looking for all the positives and you're looking for the challenges and the hurdles and the things to work on as well. And how do you find out about it? You ask. You put that elephant out there on Front Street. I remember going to a very trusted colleague and asking her about my professional reputation. And I said, look, I promise whatever you tell me, I'm going to say thank you because this is information I want to know. And I got that answer and I wasn't real happy with it. And so I had to lean in a little bit more to kind of figure out exactly what it means. And what it meant was that my leadership style didn't totally gel with the executive leadership style. It didn't mean that they were grossly unhappy with my work, but they just were frustrated by some of the approaches I took. That allowed me to show up a little bit differently in that way, in the sense that I knew what I was playing with, okay? You ask your direct supervisor, but I would also encourage you to ask trusted colleagues with whom you know can give you a real honest answer, okay? Because you're looking for information that is gonna make you a little raw and a little bit vulnerable perhaps, okay? We're not looking for people to yes us to death. We're looking for information that we can use to help manage our career, okay? You want to make absolutely certain that they are telling you the truth with a capital T and not truth with a small t. And the way I distinguish that is truth with a capital T is absolute. It is evidence-based. It is factual. There are reference points for you to go back and go, okay, I know where that's coming from. Truth with a small t, it's not as strong, right? It's a perception. There might be some stuff in there, but we want to know absolutely because our professional reputation is so important to us. And so we have to manage that accordingly. You may be in a situation where you are leaning toward a promotion and you may not have gotten it, or you may have been told, well, we're just not really ready for you yet, or we don't think you're ready. We just need more time. That's a pet peeve of mine. You need more time. I need to know exactly what it looks like. Can you give me like 3 definitive things that I need to work on so I can show up in that way to help meet those expectations? Because telling me I need more time doesn't change my behavior in any way. It's kind of, for the lack of a better phrase, it's kind of crappy feedback. So we want to be careful with that, right? We want to make sure we are so clear with that. And we get clear with that because we lean in. We lean in to learn a little bit more. And once you get all that information, then you can absolutely plan what the actions are going to be. Right, Jen, right? Give me concrete info. Give me something to work with, okay? Let's say you've got someone on your team who just doesn't show up to work on time, all right? They're missing meetings. They're coming in late. They're not adhering to a full workday and stuff. As a manager, you need to address that. But more importantly, you need to set those expectations. And we do that by giving really clear feedback. On such and such a day, I noticed that you were not in the building. I called your office. I had facilities run your Castle card to see if you were actually in the building on time and you were not. And I looked online and you were not logged in. You need to report to work on time. Whatever those issues are that they have, that is for them to figure out. That is where human resources may need to get involved in things like that. But we need to make sure we get really, really good evidence-based feedback so we know how to take action. And we get that by asking the right questions, and that's how we lean in. If you're looking to create that next advancement opportunity, and here's the second scenario we're going to talk about today, right? That next advancement opportunity is either internally or externally. And whatever it is, when you are leaning in to figure out what that next job actually looks like, because that's what you want to do. It's a step for where you ultimately want to go within your career if you're working a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year plan. Okay. It's also about knowing who do you want to work for, where do you want to work, and most importantly, why do you want to do that kind of work? That's where leaning in gets you all of those answers. It's asking those questions to see what opportunities may be available. It's about networking. It's about exploring and investigating. And it's also, most importantly, about us reflecting and figuring out what that's all going to look like. For my family and my close friends, they've known for literally about 10 months that I was giving serious consideration to leaving my organization to open up my coaching practice, which I did, as you know, in January. And I modeled this whole process. Like, I can't begin to tell you how many people I talked to and asked them questions, and particularly corporate coaches who were running a full-time business, to say, what was this journey like for you? And I networked with people on LinkedIn. I would literally send an invitation on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm an aspiring coach working toward my certification. I'm wondering if you would be interested in kindly giving me 15 minutes of your time so I can ask you these 3 questions. And I would put them in the message to them. And like 75% of them were completely willing to talk to me, and completely talk to me for more than 15 minutes, which was great. But it gave me information, and it gave me things to think about when I would commute home, or when I would get up in the morning, or when I had a day at work that went really, really well and I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave, and a day when I had a really, really rough day at work and I was driving home, and I would, be like, I'm gonna quit tomorrow, and then be like, all right, back that off. Probably not the best move, because I wasn't ready to take action. And so that's why that lean in phase is so critical. So if you are thinking about staying in your industry, staying in your organization, jumping outside of your organization, that's all that opportunity for you to lean in and go to those trusted people to ask those questions. And I never, ever, ever want to underestimate the power of engaging and leaning in with those people who are closest to us. Your spouses, your girlfriends, your boyfriends, your partners, your family members, anyone whom you say is a loved one that you value and trust their opinion, you engage them and you lean in as well, because those decisions that we make with our careers certainly impact our families. And we want to make sure we have support and we're moving in the best way possible with that. All right, let me pause for a second, because it's great seeing so many people today. So any questions, any things that are coming up, any ahas, right? So hey, Teresa, hey, John, Chuck, Martine, good to see everybody. Just kind of wondering what's coming up, right? As we think about leaning in. And the last example, I'll throw this out here as you're thinking, if you want to put anything in the chat though, is sometimes we deal with difficult team members. Sometimes we deal with people whom aren't showing up the way we would like them to. Maybe they're a little ornery. Maybe they're a little crusty, a little rough around the edges. There's a reason for that. And certainly there are questions we can ask and questions we can't. But they're showing up in a way that's not the way we would like them to show up, or we need them to show up. And I do think there's an appropriate way for us to kind of engage, to lean in a little bit more, to find out what's the root cause, what's going on. And also from a standpoint of how can we help, right? How can we support? Because if we have someone on our team who, let's say, is the boat anchor, they're pulling everybody down, we need to have everybody kind of pulling their own weight. And so they may not realize they're being the boat anchor, or they may not realize there's an issue. My guess is they probably do, and they're just waiting for someone to call them out on it, or they're hiding under the radar, or flying low, so to speak. But again, those are opportunities where if you're in a role where you have direct reports or you are responsible for a team, I truly believe that it is your responsibility as a manager to lean in to make sure that your team is functioning effectively. And if they're not, help them. Okay? Help them in a way that you can set some really clear expectations for support and ground rules, and at times consequences if need be, but get them back on board as best as possible. I know throughout several organizations when I have had to, write the dreaded performance improvement plan. And I say dreaded because it's always a stressful time, right? It's stressful to deliver it. We kind of don't want to have to do it because it takes up a lot of our time. But whenever I've had to deliver a performance improvement plan, I have always delivered it with the intention that it wasn't a path out, it was a path back, right? And so we know that in performance improvement plans that people, it is either for immediate and sustained improvement, or if that improvement is not immediate and sustained, it could potentially lead to a termination. So I always looked at it as a way to get that person back. And if they didn't want to, if it wasn't the job, if they decided to leave on their own, or even quite simply, if they didn't meet the expectations that were laid out in the PIP, it led to a termination. Those are real clear. We've leaned in enough at that point to begin to take some action. And that is the value in leaning in, right? We want to make sure that we're able to lean in ways that give us all the information we need before we can step forward and take some action. All right. So, was this helpful? Was it, did it shed a little nugget of wisdom or something like that maybe? Just kind of, sharing some content and things like that. Again, I really appreciate people joining and stuff today. And I wanted to leave you with this. Anything that I do, anything that I'm sharing with you comes from a very genuine place, and a place that either I have experienced or I have investigated or researched, because this is all about sharing content with you. And I have been listening and leaning in a lot when it has come to the initial launch of my coaching practice. And there are things that are going really, really well, and some things that could be going a little bit better. And this is just an opportunity for me to lean in a little bit. And I'm leaning in pretty hard on something that I'm really, really excited about that could potentially grab hold in the next few months. And I promise you, I will share it out with you, but I can't share it yet because I'm not ready to take action. I'm still investigating as to what it all looks like, but I'm pretty excited about it. So that just tells me I'm leaning in and to some really, really close friends and colleagues, and also some real critical friends who've been very kind to share some key points and observations for me. I'm not going to name you out specifically, but I want you to know you have my heartfelt thanks, because I truly believe that this phase of leaning in is one of the most powerful phases we ever experience in our career, because it is preparing us for the launch, and it is preparing us for what comes next. So I invite you this week to think about the ways in which you are leaning in, whether it be something in your career, in your organization, or maybe even something personally, but thinking about the ways in which you are leaning in and how you are considering taking some action. because next week we're going to talk about execution and what that action phase actually looks like as we go to really create whatever that next advancement opportunity is. So thanks, Mike. It seems to be one thing to shift the energy of one person, but when the group seems stuck, how do you shift the group? Mike, great question. Thanks for asking that. So for me, whenever I have dealt with a team that is truly struggling with their energy, what I have done is really kind of dug into exactly what that issue is. So one thing that comes to mind for me is I was asked to take over a team and to help kind of make them a little bit more functioning, adhering to processes, and kind of helping to boost morale. And so when I surveyed them, and by survey, I'm not talking about like sending out a form. I'm talking like 30-minute one-on-one conversations with everybody. Because for me, it was about holding the space and really listening and setting the ground rules of, look, I'm going to gather some information and ask you some questions. And I set ground rules about, I'm not going to name you specifically, but this is all done as a way to kind of figuring out a baseline for the team and where we can go. The biggest issue the team had was communication. They felt very, very frustrated by leadership not communicating things clearly and in a timely manner, and that processes weren't being followed. And so they in turn couldn't do their job. So they were always, as a group, showing up in a very victim or fighter mentality where they simply just really, really, really loathe coming to work, let alone having to stay late. So when I started leaning in and asking them what communication looked like, it was timely responses to emails. I said, okay, well, what is timely, right? They said within 24 hours. And I got even more curious. I was like, okay, well, is it 24 hours or is it one business day? And they were like, okay, one business day because we don't want to be answering emails over the weekend. So, okay, great. What else? And they were like, we need meetings to be held. Like when I call a meeting with somebody, I need to make sure they're going to honor that time. Well, in this particular organization, that wasn't always possible. So we set some ground rules about making sure that the time was still honored. If it wasn't at that moment, that it was immediately rescheduled. So we set some ground rules about not just canceling meetings, but saying, hey, something's come up. I need to cancel this meeting. Can we meet tomorrow at 9 a.m.? Because at least people felt like that was honoring the time. So when I got all that information, I took it back to my leadership because I needed to build a bridge between the team and with the leadership. And kudos to leadership in this. I had an amazing boss at the time who was really, really open to hearing these kind of things, but it was hard. It was hard to hear, you're not communicative enough and you don't hold time for people and people feel you're unavailable. And she was like, I am, like I'm getting pulled in so many different directions. So we started out really, really small. And this is what was so big about shifting the energy of the group. We set small expectations moving forward. So things that they needed answers on immediately came to me with a promise that I would respond within 24 hours or the next business day. If I need to engage people above me, my director, I had made agreements with her about making sure I got information. And one of the things that had come up was that her inbox would literally do this. It would just keep like going around. And so I said, look, I know you're busy. I know you're getting pulled in so many different directions and you're putting out fires and the president of the company needs you and so on and so forth. But I know I'm a little lower on the chain, but I need you too. So what do I do when you don't respond to an email? And what she said to me was, send it again, but highlight my name. And I said, well, how does that make a difference? She goes, that just lets me know I didn't respond first. I said, okay, what do I do if you don't respond to that email? And she said, well, I'm going to respond to that email. And I go, you get busy. What if you don't? And she goes, send it again and highlight my name again, but this time put the red exclamation point on it. So, okay. And at that point, I didn't ask her what comes next, because what I said to her was, and if you don't respond to that email, I'm going to show up at your door. And at that point, you know, you've missed 2 or 3 emails from me and I need you. So we had a really, really good laugh over that. And the other thing was, we made an agreement and I said to her, there are going to be times when I'm going to say to you, so-and-so needs to talk to you. And when I tell you that, I'm going to need you to really honor and acknowledge that meeting as one of the most important things in your day, because if we're going to rebuild this team, we have to rebuild trust. And trust here is making sure that we say and do what we're going to do. We're going to follow through on it. And so there were things like that that we did that started some small ways about building trust. And trust just simply meaning repeated behavior over time. The people began to know what was expected in those situations. And within about 6 to 8 months, the team did transform. They transformed in a way that their questions were getting answered. There was a lot more acknowledging and validating of the processes that were working and were not working, so we could tighten up some of those processes. And the other thing, which I will tell you, it is some of the work I am most proud of in my career, is that we actually repaired this relationship between this director and the team to really highlight and profile her as an expert, as an authority, as someone who was like uber knowledgeable in the organization, as a go-to resource. And that's where she shined. That's where she was absolutely best, because handling all the day-to-day stuff of the team was not her forte. And she was smart enough and amazing enough to know that that wasn't her strength. And she asked me to take that over for her. And in doing that, we were able to kind of help build the team. And that repaired a lot of relationships. So for Mike, back to your question, like all of that, you know, it doesn't happen overnight, but ultimately that was what really shifted the energy level on the team. And yeah, Jennifer, absolutely. Shout out to Simon Sinek. Love that book. Yeah, trust is everything. Because without it, you don't have anything, right? Without trust, it just doesn't exist. So thanks for that question. Hopefully that helped. And certainly if people have any particular questions about groups that you're dealing with or how best to maybe approach a certain situation, drop me a note. You can message me on the Facebook page, or you can email me at john@johnnerwell.com. I am more than happy to help you figure out some solutions to any problems or challenges that you might be dealing with. So, well, guess what, everybody? We just set a record for the longest Facebook Live that I've done since I started. So we're at about 28 minutes, and I thank you for the great conversation and the great questions. It's great that we were able to join and stuff like that. Next week, I have to move the date. So we're gonna meet on Thursday next week instead of Wednesday, but I'll make sure I message all of you about it. Just a slight shift in schedule next week, but I'm still gonna honor and hold this space as we talk about next week why amazing leaders take action. So again, invite you to think about ways in which you are leaning in and preparing to take that action, and I will join you again, and we'll meet all again in this space next week. Have an amazing week, and if you get a chance, go throw a bowling ball and knock down some pins this week. Take care, everybody. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.